Wow, hitting just 210 with a 300 on base and 386 slugging on the year with an 87 weighted runs created plus. Oh wait, that's last year through 13 games. And actually this year the Giants are hitting better. So a lot of concern right now for people among fans about the Giants offense, but they're doing better offensively than they were to start 2021. So we'll break down the numbers, talk about what's going on, and preview this upcoming series next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thanks for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And yeah, I couldn't help myself there. I had to kind of throw a curveball in the little introduction, talking about, man, these dismal offensive numbers, just an 87 weighted runs created plus by the offense. What slouches? Well, guess what? That was last year through 13 games. They were hitting 210 with a 300 on base, 386 slugging, about 13 points below the league average. And this year, they're actually about 8 points below the league average offensively right now. So it's actually better. Last year, they had scored 42 runs through 13 games. This year, they've scored 55 runs through 13 games. So I'm sure that this is something I've talked about a lot, but on Twitter, people are just generally kind of antsier and angrier, and comment sections, it's the same kind of deal, whether it's on YouTube or The Athletic. And so as someone who talks about the Giants all the time, I see this stuff all the time, and so do all the other reporters. And I think we're influenced by it more than we should be. So plenty of you listening probably aren't all that concerned and aren't upset and anxious and antsy about the Giants offense. But there are plenty of people who are. And so that's kind of who I'm responding to here. Maybe that's not fair, but the fact is, I know for a fact, because we were doing this exact same thing last year. I'm sure if I went back and looked for the episodes around this time last year, I was doing the same thing where I was saying, relax, it's early, it's 13 games, they're going to be fine. When we look at some of the individual performers from 2021 through 13 games, Brandon Crawford had a 63 weighted runs created plus. Brandon Belt, 64. Darin Ruf, 98. Buster Posey was at 105. They ended the year, Crawford was at 139, meaning about 40 points above average by weighted runs created plus. Brandon Belt was at 158. Darin Ruf was at 144, and Buster Posey at 140. So yeah, turns out 13 games is not really all that predictive of what you're going to do moving forward. And this year, their actual kind of slash line looks worse than it did at this point in 2021, but the weighted runs created plus is actually better. And the way that that works is that the league average is worse this year. So that is a factor right now. And I think that a lot of people probably, I think, only typically watch the Giants and not necessarily the rest of the league. But, I've always paid attention to the whole league. And basically what you need to know, if you don't know, is that league offense is just majorly down right now. We're currently seeing the lowest run scoring rate since 1976. We haven't seen runs per game dip below 4 over a full season since 1976, and right now it's at 3.99. I literally, not to call anybody out specifically, but someone on Twitter was just telling me how the Giants' 4.23 runs per game was toilet water in today's game and a recipe for losses. It's above average. They're literally scoring more runs than average. So no, it's not toilet water in today's game and a recipe for losses. Their offense, generally their offense has been below average, but not by run scoring, I suppose. So maybe they're fortunate to be at 4.23 runs per game. But the point is, offense is down, and also it's early, and I'm 100% sure, like, everyone needs to look themselves in the mirror who's really upset right now about the offense and think back to what was your reaction last year through 13 games. And I think it's hard to be honest about that, but I'm positive. If you're panicking now, there's no way you were not panicking at the same point last season when they were just about the same but a little bit worse offensively than they are right now. It doesn't make any sense that you would be cool with last year but not cool with this. So all of this to say, they're 8-5, right? They just lost 3 out of 4 to the Mets. It was their first series loss in the regular season since early September of 2021. And of course, they swept the first series of this road trip, and then they lost 3 out of 4. So they're 4-3 on the road trip, and now they go face an inferior Nationals team. They should be able to win this series, but really they just need to win 2 games out of the next 4, and they would have an above 500 trip. So they could lose 2 out of 3 and then win the 1 game in Milwaukee. They could win 2 out of 3, lose the 1 game in Milwaukee. So when all is said and done, they're in good position still to have a nice road trip. And this is a very difficult trip going through Cleveland, which was playing like the best team in baseball when the Giants came in, and they swept them. The Mets playing like the best team in baseball, and the Giants, they really had their shots in particularly the first game. I think that was the winnable game, and then they won the Rodon start. So kind of to me, like, a split was in reach, but okay, you lost 3 out of 4 to a team that is very talented and playing like the best team in baseball right now. So I just kind of think so it goes sometimes. And when all is said and done, they're 8-5, and they've prevented runs at a very good rate. And so the other thing that I get a lot of is that we should like kind of discount some of their runs because they came in bunches, and a lot of their runs came in like 2 games. One where they had 13 or something, and then the other where they had 8, I guess, in Cleveland. Well, guess what? We don't get to not count those just because they came in bunches. My counter argument is like, we don't discount runs that are scored in bunches in an individual game just because they're scored in bunches, right? If you score like 6 runs in the second inning and then none for the rest of the game, yeah, you talk about it, oh, it would have been nice to continue to add on. But when all is said and done, we don't say, well, let's just erase those runs then because they came in 1 inning versus spread out. No, runs are runs, and we count it as their season average in their season average regardless. So I'm not all that concerned, but what is maybe more concerning, I mean, league average being down is interesting to talk about because a ball that is being put in a humidor in every stadium could be influencing the flight of the ball, and it could particularly hurt a team like the Giants if this lasts and it's not just weather related, but also injuries. Steven Duggar going down with an injury yesterday. Already, he shouldn't even be here if they're at full strength. It would be Wade in his spot, not necessarily in center, but I think Yastrzemski would move to center with Wade and Joc Pederson on the corners against right-handed pitching. But now they're going to have to go to a third line of defense, and it's going to be potentially a very interesting move, somebody added to the 40-man. So we'll talk about who that is and what to expect in just a moment. But first, it's that time of year I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Go to Built.com, scroll down to their macros chart, and you will be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb, and importantly to me, low sugar, despite the delicious candy-like taste. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Whether she prefers a statement piece or everyday subtle elegance, BlueNile.com has fine jewelry options for mom. Shop high-quality classic diamond earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, or gemstone pendant necklaces. Looking for fine jewelry but having trouble choosing? That's me. Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Mark Mother's Day with something enduring. Classic diamond stud earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, birthstone pendants, and so much more at BlueNile.com. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off $500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day. Use code LOCKEDON, that's Locked On, plus every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. All right, here we go. I want to talk about some of the specifics as to what's going on with this Giants team now that I got that kind of rant out of the way about, I'm not saying necessarily that just because they struggled last year through 13 games offensively and then ended up being great. By the way, they were second overall in non-pitcher weighted runs created plus when the dust settled, behind only the Houston Astros. Yes, ahead of the Dodgers, ahead of everybody else but the Astros in non-pitcher weighted runs created plus when all was said and done last year. 107 wins, franchise record in homers, most homers in the National League, and on and on and on. Just because they struggled to start the year and then ended up that way doesn't mean, we can't say, oh, they're struggling this year also, and therefore they're going to finish out great again. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, if we're honest with ourselves, anyone who's super worried about this year was probably super worried about last year. And you can't just take out Buster Posey and go from the best offensive team in the league to the last. It just doesn't work that way. It would have to be a lot of other things going wrong as well. And I've actually been encouraged by some of the things I've seen. Like Mike Yastrzemski is coming around, in my opinion. The expected numbers for Yaz are really good, and his swings, I thought, in the last few games in New York started to look better. And I think it was his last at bat of the game yesterday, hit a home run. So I look for Yastrzemski to potentially break out a little bit. And also Joc Pederson has been consistently very good, but there are some weak spots, and Steven Duggar offensively was kind of a weak spot, but defensively he was giving you really good play in center field, and base running wise he was also doing well there. And so, you've got guys like Joey Bart who are really interesting because there's extreme good and extreme bad, mostly extreme bad, but also coupled with good things. But the plus 50+% strikeout rate is untenable. He just can't continue to strike out that much, but it has just continued at that rate. And so something's got to give there. If he keeps doing that, the overall stuff is just going to get dragged way down to the point where he's not productive, and you're going to have to start thinking about making a move. And I don't know. We can just look through each individual player, but certainly I haven't loved the at-bats, but I'm 100% sure I didn't love the at-bats to start last year. But these guys have a track record. Darin Ruff, right, has been the Giants' worst player pretty much this season. If you look at kind of wins above replacement, offensive output, he just hasn't been able to get it going at all. And last year he was a little bit below league average through 13 games as well. And then he ended up, a 144 weighted runs created plus. Crawford has been below average to start 2022. He was well below average to start 2021, and he ended up having a season where he finished fourth in MVP voting. So the fact of the matter is 13 games is just simply not enough to judge offensive players. And so we shouldn't, and we won't. And the fact that they're 8-5 with one of the best run differentials in the game is just kind of insane to be super negative right now. I just frankly won't. I'm not going to be negative, but I unfortunately do feel the need to respond to the negativity. So it is what it is. But let's talk about the injury. Steven Duggar, oblique. Oblique is a bad injury to have in baseball, obviously, because when you're swinging the bat, you're very much engaging those muscles, and you can't come back until it's like completely healed and you can swing 100% effort without pain. And so it takes a while. I don't know off the top of my head, like how long the average oblique injury in baseball takes to come back from, but he did say it was, quote, unbearable on this last swing that he took. He basically felt it, I think, the day prior in an at-bat against Max Scherzer, and then he felt it in his first at-bat the other day, or his first swing, and then the second swing became unbearable. So it's not good news for Steven Duggar, who's kind of a guy on the bubble of this roster anyway. As I said, if Wade Jr. was here, then Steven Duggar probably wouldn't even be on the active roster. And so Wade Jr. is close-ish to coming back. I think he's going to start a rehab assignment this weekend. So in not too much time, it's going to be, ideally, if everyone can stay healthy against righties, Pederson in maybe right field, Wade Jr. in left, and Mike Yastrzemski in center. And I think that they would be in a much better spot with that than they have been with Duggar. And also, this is kind of off topic, but I just continue to think that they would be in a much better spot as well if Tommy LaStella was able to make those starts at second base against right-handed pitching. Thairo Estrada, I'm a little confused with all the, like, he's arrived sentiment, because he's got a on-base percentage that's like 250. And while I see the tools, I like the power, I like the defense, I like the athleticism, I'm not going to sit here and say he's arrived based on a guy who's got a 250 on-base percentage. And Tommy LaStella, I just think Estrada belongs on the Major League roster. I have no doubt about that. But LaStella starting at second base and Estrada being off the bench, and when there's a lefty starter, he starts, and when there's a lefty reliever that comes in and LaStella's spot comes up, you put in Estrada in a big situation there. So I'm all for that. But Duggar and Estrada kind of being in the lineup every day, no matter who's on the mound, hasn't been ideal. And I think when we see some of the at-bats that haven't ultimately been productive, it's coming from those two spots a lot of the time. So anyway, the injury to Steven Duggar is significant, and we're likely to see, we're going to see a corresponding roster move no matter what, because they're putting him on the injured list. But the question is, who's it going to be? And there was speculation immediately that it would be Elliot Ramos, because he's kind of the only outfielder on the 40-man roster who can just come up in his place. Luke Williams, I suppose, also on the 40-man, who could come up. He had just been sent down, but you can call a guy up who had just been sent down when there's an injury. But the issue is Steven Duggar's left-handed. They're facing all this right-handed pitching. I don't think they want to put in another right-handed bat into a lineup when they're already kind of overexposing themselves with more righties in the lineup against right-handed pitching than they might otherwise want if everybody was healthy, like Wade and LaStella. So I know I said I would do it last, but this time, coming up next, we're going to talk about who the replacement is going to be. We have a report. It is a player maybe you haven't even heard of, but you probably did if you were following spring training. Someone who's going to have to be added to the 40-man, which will mean a corresponding 40-man move, which could mean the designating for assignment of someone on the active roster. So we'll speculate a little bit about that in just a moment. BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting stats and info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs, go Dubs, and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. I hope you got in on the Carlos Rodon Cy Young hype train, because those odds are getting shorter and shorter every time he goes out there and shoves. So check out the latest there on BetOnline. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, as promised, I want to talk about what's going on with the injury and the corresponding roster move that's likely coming. Our speculation, and a lot of other people speculated this as well, was that Luis González, whom the Giants kind of picked up off, not waivers, but I think was it off waivers? Was he a minor league free agent? I'm actually not exactly sure how the Giants came to acquire Luis González, but what I do know is that he had a great spring training for the Giants, just consistently excellent at bats, hit the ball hard like every time. And he was a 3rd round draft pick by the White Sox in 2017, made his major league debut with them in 2020. Also, I mean, we're talking a 3-game major league debut. Also played in 6 games for the big league team, the White Sox, in 2021, but ended up with the Giants. I think he was a minor league free agent signing. I'm not exactly sure if it was a signing like that or a waiver claim, but the Giants got him. He looked great as a non-roster invitee in spring. We don't necessarily read into spring stats, but he was that good that he warranted attention. And they sent him to AAA, where he's hit 283 with a 389 on base percentage. Importantly, when you see over 100-point gap between average and on base percentage in the positive direction, it means you're walking a lot and that you have a good idea of the strike zone, which is something this team really, really values. His walk rate was about 15%. The major league average is about 9%. So a really good idea at the plate, and a 500 slugging, which came out to a 217 isolated power. Strikeout rate was just 22.2%, and it was a 129 weighted runs created plus. So it's always important to keep in mind the offensive environment. Like, you can put up these numbers that look good on the surface, but if that's what the whole league is doing, it's important to note that the league average is X. But for him, he was about 30 percentage points above league average by weighted runs created plus in AAA this year in 11 games, 54 plate appearances, 3 home runs, 4 stolen bases in 6 attempts. And he's been playing center. I'm not sure he's like a true center fielder. I think he's like Yastrzemski, like LaMonte Wade, kind of a corner guy who's stretched a bit in center but can play there. So I believe that Luis González is going to be the call-up in place of Steven Duggar. But Luis González is not on the 40-man roster. And so, putting Duggar on the IL, it opens up a spot on the active Major League roster, but it doesn't open up a 40-man spot, and their 40-man roster is full. And so we had a report, actually, from Alex Pavlovich last night that he's hearing that the Giants plan to have Luis González and Jakob Junis in Washington, D.C. for this upcoming series. And so Junis is a pitcher, right-handed pitcher, has a lot of Major League experience with the Royals, has been with the Giants in AAA, signed over the offseason. González, though, like I said, would have to be added to the 40-man. So to add Junis and to add Luis González would take a second active roster move in addition to putting Steven Duggar on the IL, and the adding of González would take a 40-man move. And so my pure speculation is that if you DFA somebody off the active roster, someone who's currently on the active roster, it takes care of both of those things. It would clear a 40-man spot, and it would clear that second active roster spot in addition to the spot that opens when you put Duggar on the IL. So I don't know if this is like professional of me or not, but my speculation is that Tyler Beede could be in some jeopardy. Today is probably going to be a bullpen game for the Giants, and yet Tyler Beede pitched a couple of innings against the Mets in the loss yesterday. They're clearly not putting him into big situations, and he hasn't been all that effective, and we've seen more of the same where he's kind of struggled with command. He's out of minor league options. They have this roster trimming that's going to come up in about 10 days. I'm just not sure you can carry a guy that's not going to give you important innings. At least they don't seem to be giving him important innings. And you've got to trim your roster. And so this move might have been inevitable anyway in 10 days. But now if you need to clear that spot, then it starts to make even more sense. And then the fact that Jakob Junis is supposedly going to be in Washington, D.C., he's a right-handed pitcher. So he could essentially take that spot that Tyler Beede is currently taking, and he's optionable. And so when you're, I hate to say, done with him, but once he's provided the depth and coverage that he provides, he's a guy who can get sent back and forth, and that's obviously more valuable than a guy who cannot be sent back and forth. And so it's possible that the corresponding move could be a Tyler Beede DFA. It could be a DFA of somebody else on the 40-man roster and they could option somebody off the active roster. It could be putting someone on the 60-day injured list, because that does open up a 40-man spot. So there are a lot of possibilities. Also, I'm just realizing I forgot to mention the Giants made a trade yesterday with the Cubs acquiring a right-handed pitcher who can be a starter for them, and he was optioned to AAA. And so that also makes Tyler Beede's spot on the roster a little bit more precarious as they add more right-handed optionable pitching depth. And so all of that combined with the fact that Beede pitched yesterday, so he won't be involved in the bullpen game today when they need the bullpen to eat some innings, and Junis is going to be there. I just wouldn't be resting so easy if I was Tyler Beede. So speculation, I kind of hate to do it, but coming up on Monday, I suppose we'll talk about everything that goes on over the weekend here. Giants facing an inferior Nationals team, but they still got some players, and it is baseball and anything can happen. But hopefully Giants able to take 2 out of 3 or better in this series. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast, recaps of MLB games with analysis from our local experts, taking fans through the season like no other network. Free and available wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thank you in advance, and thank you so much to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again on Monday. Have a great weekend. Stay Locked On Giants.